Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. We are happy to have you with us today. So we're just going to wait for people to trickle in. How are you there? So really quickly, my name is Stacy Guillen, and I'm on the Kanarys team focused on business development and strategic partnerships. I will be your moderator today. So welcome, welcome. Thank you. Everyone's trickling in. I'm also joined by my colleague from Kanarys, Jared Fitzpatrick, our Director of User Engagement. A few housekeeping items before we get started with our fabulous webinar speaker. First, we want to ensure that everyone can hear us during the discussion so that there are no distractions. Please keep your microphone on mute. If you do have any audio or video trouble, you can message Jared or myself and we'll provide those instructions to help you out. And then second of all, we're trying a new format. This is going to be an interactive session. So you're more than welcome to disable your video or enable your video. We're going to have a very small, intimate discussion today. And we definitely want to hear your questions. That's what we're here for, to provide a safe space for our D&I leaders and practitioners. So during the webinar, feel free. There is a Q&A section in the bottom of your dashboard. Please provide any questions there, send any questions. We also have a chat that you can raise any questions there as well. And then thirdly, this session is being recorded. So it will be emailed to all of our attendees after the webinar. Excellent. Now, so while we have people joining the webinar, please feel free to share your LinkedIn profile in the chat so that we can continue to network and talk offline and connect with others in the audience. Again, our goal is to provide courageous conversations and just create a community for all of us here, D&I executives and leaders. It looks like more people are signing in. Welcome. And for those that are joining us just now, welcome again. So I'm going to quickly give you a second introduction here for those that walked in. Again, my name is Stacy. I'm the Director of Business Development at Kanarys. And just to give you a brief overview, my initial exposure to D&I came from working as head of partnership development at a large Latinx professional organization. And I work with companies to help source diverse talent opportunities. Then I made my leap into D&I work, and I quickly realized that there was a gap between initiatives with the companies that were implemented and the desired outcomes for attracting, engaging, and retaining people from diverse backgrounds, which is where it led me to Kanarys. Kanarys, as you all know, is a platform with a mission to improve workplace and foster more inclusive environments. On the Kanarys website, www.kanarys.com, people can anonymously provide feedback to their employers on issues related to the lived experiences at the workplace and of the diverse employees. We ask people can also share information and ideas related to benefits, ERGs, and policies to promote inclusion. I also want to share here that we at Kanarys then use that information to help companies make data-driven decisions about their D&I initiatives. When we partner with those companies, they receive a personalized dashboard with tailored D&I metrics to create real change instead of just check-the-box initiatives. So part of our ongoing commitment to drive and promote inclusion, we've created these multi-part webinar series focused on helping D&I leaders to advance diversity and inclusion during the COVID pandemic. Last week, we heard from Lisa Ong, founder and executive of Wishing Out Loud, on the impact of the Asian American and Pacific Islander workforce. And today, we are thrilled to have John Register, Kanarys advisor and disability rights expert, with us to discuss how employers are in a unique position to embrace diversity and accelerate disability inclusion in their workplace. So without further ado, let me introduce to you all John. So John Register, upon earning his BA in communications from the University of Arkansas, John enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he proudly served for 6 years. As a Desert Shield and Desert Storm veteran, he continued to pursue athletic excellence while on active duty, participating in the Army's World's Class Athlete Program. And he also won 9 gold medals in the Armed Services competition, as well as the World Military Championships. Then in 1988, John qualified for the Olympic trials. And then with these accomplishments, he seemed destined to compete as a member of the 1996 Olympic team. But then on May 17, 1994, his life would forever be altered with one misstep over the hurdle. After a faulty landing, John's left knee resulted in a severed artery. An attempt to reconstruct using a vein from his right leg failed. Within days, an amputation was suggested. The alternative was a useless left knee and ankle, which would restrict his movements to a wheelchair for mobility. 2 years after his run with an artificial leg, he earned the silver medal in the long jump at the 2000 Paralympic Games. John's life has truly come full circle in his transformation from All-American long jumper to Paralympic silver medalist. His exceptional story of courage and inspiration led him to found Inspired Communications, where he serves as an inspirational speaker, helping his audiences apply life lessons learned through the times of testing to focus on what is possible. In 2003, he accepted a position with the United States Olympic Committee and birthed the USOC Paralympic Military Program. So as you guys can all tell, John is incredibly well accomplished. As a disabilities rights advocate, he has consulted with companies like Southwest Airlines, Kimberly-Clark, Coca-Cola, KPMG, and more on why disability matters at the workplace. So without further ado, thank you for being here, John. Let's jump right in, and I will turn it over to you. John, incredible.
Stacy, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate it. You could have kept on going. Get more. How's everybody doing today? I hope you're feeling well. I'm going to quickly share this screen so we can jump on into our presentation for today. But I am so excited to talk to you a little bit about disabilities, how I got into this space in the first place. And I think we're going to have a really rich conversation about what is actually possible in our environment for today, and how we can look at people with disabilities in a way that actually focuses on improvement, on growth, and not just on the person with the disability, but actually our growth mindset. And before we start, before we really jump into this quickly, I want to do a poll. And this poll is going to ask you to rate a question from 1 to 10. So when you look at this question on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it? How important is it for you to consider people with disabilities as part of your business model? What do you think? What do you think that is? So there is a poll that just comes up in there. Just click in that poll box, select just one answer, 1 through 10, and let's have a little quick dialogue discussion about that in that poll chat box. So as those are coming in, it's really fascinating to me to see how I could go from a world-class athlete and then flat on my back and then to the Paralympic Games. We're going to talk about that journey. But we really want to talk about that journey in the context of how people see themselves in that light. How do we look at ourselves first? What are the fears we might have around our own environment? What are the fears we have about other people? What are the fears that society might place on us in the first place? And I had to do a whole learning experience through this. So Stacy, are there any pollings that's come through right now on what they're feeling between the 1 through 10? What's going on out there?
Yes. So we have a rank here of 10. 44% did answer 10. So we have between 8, 9, and 10. That's where we have most
8,
of our
9, and 10. It's kind of like how we rate ourselves, right? When we say, well, I'm doing really well. I'm doing pretty great. But when you look at the numbers, if everybody was rating themselves as 8, 9, or 10, and we take a look at when George H.W. Bush signs the disability law into the bill into law, right? In 1990, when he signs that document, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is about 72% of those that could actually work. And when you take it 30 years into the future, to this point in time, we're celebrating 30 years of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The number has not shifted. It's not gone down at all. Well, about 0.5%. It's now about 71.5, 72%. So if everybody was rating themselves as 8, 9, or 10, we would be way low. We'd be at the kind of the numbers that we're experiencing in our market today on unemployment, well, outside of COVID-19. And so for me, I began to understand that there was really this stigma around people with disabilities. And I was a part of that because I was not a person with a disability or living with a disability. And I began to find that there was access limitations that I was having in my own life. And here's a story that I want to share with you about that, one of those points and those moments in my life. I had just made the Paralympic team. Now, the Paralympic Games are for athletes with physical disabilities and visual impairments. It was a Paralympic swim team. And I'm sitting in a gate waiting area in the Washington Dulles International Airport with 60 of my Paralympic teammates. Now, as I'm sitting there watching my teammates, I'm like, is this really the All-American team that I want to be on? All I can see were people with disabilities. There were people who were blind, people who were paralyzed, people who had cerebral palsy, and of course, those like myself who were amputees. I'm like, you know, I was a 4-time All-American in Arkansas. I twice went to the Olympic trials. Is this really America's team to show up to the world? In fact, I was sitting next to a gentleman who was in a 3-piece, beautiful Armani suit. He had gator skin shoes on, and he was talking so loud on his cell phone that I just wanted to reach out and touch him, but I kept my hands to myself. And as I'm sitting there in my stupor of trying to figure out what's the value, what's the benefit of being on this team, I'm thinking. And then I'm interrupted in my thought by the gate agent. And she comes up to the lectern with her little self and she says, ladies and gentlemen, flight number 300 is now ready for passenger boarding. Will everyone who needs a little bit more time and assistance, please get up and board the aircraft at this time? Well, 60 of my Paralympic teammates and I, we got up and began to walk down the jet bridge because we had disabilities and we get to board first. So I thought to myself, oh, benefit number one. Now that's a perk. So I get on the plane and I take my seat at 17F. I like the window seat and I'm sitting on my row and I'm watching this amazing spectacle of all of these individuals coming on board the aircraft. The blind are being led on by the shoulders of the people that are their co-workers. The second one, the people in wheelchairs, they're being led on in aisle chairs. Those who are of little stature, they're getting onto their plane. Those who have cerebral palsy, they're using the backs of the chairs to get to their seats. And then I see Tree. Now Tree, he is a double-leg bilateral amputee. He's on the wheelchair basketball team. And Tree is standing about 6 feet 8 inches tall. But I get it, Tree can be a tree at 6'8" or stump at 4'3", depending upon which legs he picks out of his closet in the morning time. So he has those stilt legs on, he's ducking underneath the exit sign, and he stops at seat 7C. He stops at seat 7C, he sits down, he pops his artificial legs off, and then he goes to the he takes those possible the flight attendant, and the flight attendant takes those legs and places them in the overhead bin. I said, I'm gonna turn that. But I get it. Benefit number two, more leg room. And as Tree now is sitting there in his seat, the flight attendant asks him, Tree, can I help you with anything else? Do you need any more time, attention? Can I help you with anything? And Tree says, no, ma'am, I'm good. And off she walks back to the red carpet curtains to bring all the ABs on board, all the able-bodied individuals on board. We call them tabs, temporarily able-bodied individuals. And as she goes to bring them out onto the aircraft, Tree now being 4'3", he jumps up into a seat. He takes his long basketball arms, hoists himself up to the overhead bin, climbs in, lays prone next to those legs, closes the bin door. I'm back in 17F, and I'm looking up. I cannot believe what I'm just seeing. I catch eyes with Amy, my swim teammate. Amy turns beet red, puts her head down, twiddles her thumbs like they have done this 1,000 times before. So I'm on the edge of my seat. Who's going to sit in that 7th seat, in the 7th row? And as people begin to board the aircraft, all the tabs are going to the back of the plane. They're fanning out side to side. We have our winner, Mr. Armani suit. He is still talking so loud on that cell phone, and he stops at that 7th row. He's still putting his Louis Vuitton attaché, which will not fit underneath the seat back pocket in front of him. So he must go to the overhead bin where Tree has been lying prone for the last 5 minutes. And when he goes to lift that latch, boom, out Tree pops. And Armani jumps with a Carl Lewis long jump from the 7th row back to the 17th row where I'm at, and he slips on those gator skin shoes. I catch eyes back with Amy, and I say, and Amy looks back at me and says, oh, that's pretty good, John. The last guy only made to row number 10. That's a new world record. And as I'm cracking up and laughing with watching Armani pick all this stuff back up and go back to that 7th row, Tree is still in that bin. He has his hand on his chin, his little nubby leg things are crossed, and he says, "I'm sorry, sir, but this overhead bin space has been filled." So I am dying laughing. It's hysterics. I've never seen this before in my life. And as I'm laughing, my mind begins to wander back to when I was out in the gate waiting area in the airport, and I was discrediting my teammates. I was devaluing my teammates. And I began to understand and process something. The fourth kind of lesson I was learning in all of this was really this, that people with disabilities want to live independent lives. People with disabilities are adaptable and they are resilient. And people with disabilities, as they live these lives in independence, they're living that life irrespective of how I'm showing up. No matter what my mindset was in that place, I was the one that was being that Armani, the Mr. Armani guy jerk. I was the one who had so much to learn about this entire community that I was gifted to be a part of. And I understood that I was tolerating. We talk about this word tolerance. I was tolerating. I wasn't coming closer together. I was actually repelling because I was putting myself in a higher position than they. It was me versus them, even though I'm a part of the community. I was saying that we're separated because I want to be on the Olympic team, not the Paralympic team. Turns out I was going to have a lot more fun on the Paralympic team than I ever was going to have on the Olympic team. And that's the mind shift that we have to look at. And so I understand now that tolerance and acceptance does not equal value and appreciation. So as we go into the second poll, I want you to think about in the context of your organization, of where you are right now as leaders in the organization, and you're putting the things back together and you're talking about this workforce that we have. Let's look at this question now. And what do you think the number one reason is? What do you think the number one reason is that you believe people with disabilities are not hired in the workforce? We have three answers down there: stigma, cost, or belief in not being able to do the work. So what do you think that is? It's really interesting when we talk about the word tolerance, that we're not including people. We're actually repelling them. It doesn't bring us closer together. And I actually did did a TEDx talk on this called "Why Tolerance is Not Valuable." And I'd encourage you to watch that TEDx because it'll frame it a little bit different. Usually when I come out with a definition of the word tolerance, people are repelled by what I say. I am not in agreement with that definition. So think about that in the context of how we look for people with disabilities. When you have an open door policy, for example, or just put it in this context, if you were a coach and you wanted to get the best athletes on your team, you would actually go out there and try to seek them out and find them. Most people with disabilities are not even in the equation for the conversation. Where do I find the talent? I don't even know where to go. Well, you have people on your team right now, you know where to go to get that talent. Why don't we understand and know where to go get the other talent? All right, let's go, Stacy. What do we got right now? What do you think?
Well, I'm going to end the poll. Did everyone get a chance to participate in the poll? Just waiting for some people that are still trickling in.
All right.
There's some interesting results here. I'm going to end the poll now.
All right. What do we have?
Share the results. So pretty much,
yeah,
belief in not being able to do the work had the highest answers here. So
that's so amazing, right? Because when we look at not being able to do the work, what is it about working from home right now? All of us are on this COVID stress. We've had to take our employees, we had to take the resources and shift them outside of an actual building. And most of the time when we get answers like this, people don't want others to actually do the work, or don't think they can do the work, and the work's not going to get done if they're actually at home. A lot of people with disabilities, they're at home anyway, and they know how to do the work. They're really highly leveled and highly skilled, and they don't want to they don't want to commute into an office. And so telecommunicating becomes a higher level for them to actually engage. And so we find that what we're doing right now, and the fear that people can't actually do the work, people had the fear about us not being able to do the work when we actually went out doing the telecommunicating. So put in the chat box there, what you think about that answer as I get ready to talk about this next portion of in the context of what we're going to talk about. And that's in understanding this new normal mindset, this new normal framework. I want to hear kind of what you're thinking about that as well. So in the new normal, we've heard this term all the time. It's all over the place right now. And I look at this term, this language, a little bit different than many others do. I've been using it for about 26 years, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But as we look at the new normal, most people are looking at this term as a destination. When we get to the new normal, when things get back to normal, everything will be normal. Well, what is normal in the first place? Normal to me and you might be different of what that normal actually looks like, because it's independently, it's independent for each one of our thought processes. So think about the new normal in this context. The way I look at the new normal is this, that the new is no prior point of reference. No prior point of reference. That means we don't live in the past. A lot of people haven't been able to shift in this COVID-19 environment. A lot of people are still stuck in the old ways and trying to get back. If I just get back to the way it was, if I can just get back to the old way, then everything will be fine. Everything will be quote unquote normal. But we really don't get that back. We have to begin to look in this new as the normal would be this everyday typical occurrence of a thought or an action. So what is it that we're thinking about today that can actually elevate us to tomorrow? What are the rituals that we put in place, and the rituals that lead on to a rhythm, and the rhythm elevating us to our rise? If we understand that, then the new normal is always pushing forward. It's never a plateau. It's never a destination. It's only a plateau to grow. So as you're looking at people and hiring people with disabilities into the workplace, this is really critical to see, can you give your company an advantage by this? Is there an advantage to be had by putting people who are adaptable, who show up independently and can actually do the work? Does that give you an advantage when crisis happens, when stress happens, because they've already lived through it, they have already done it? And so that becomes a force multiplier in your organization. It becomes the competitive advantage in your organization because you have people that think differently and have already been through something, and we're not sitting out there having a run on toilet paper because we're trying to figure out, is toilet paper going to save my life from coronavirus, right? I got to have a run on it. And that's a fear mechanism that we get into, and we cocoon around ourselves. But those that have been through adversity, those that have been through crisis already, they're the ones that are thinking at an elevated state already. We think about the things and the uses of technology, even cell phone technology. When we have our cell phones out, right? We're texting. Well, the texting device really wasn't for people to see how fast they could text. It was to communicate with those that could not actually hear the phone. So we're already using technology that was built for those with disabilities. So let me share another story with you around this new normal type concept. At 5:29 on May 17th, 1994, I was one of the fastest hurdlers in the United States of America, top 10 in the United States. I was also top 20 in the world. According to USA Track and Field News, I was destined to make, and one of the primary ones to make, the 1996 Olympic team in the 400-meter hurdles. Now, the 400-meter hurdles is one time around the track. It's over 10 obstacles, 10 barriers, and every obstacle I'm approaching at the speed of 8.7 meters per second. So put in the chat box real quick, how fast is 8.7 meters per second? I just want to know what you think about that. So as I'm going around the track at 8.7 meters per second, I'm clipping them really, really quickly, but the wind is blowing hard in Hays, Kansas that day. I'm on the Army's world-class athlete program team, and as I'm on this team, I'm trying to make our national championships for the military. At the same time, I'm trying to make the national championships as well. So what do we think? How fast is 8.7 meters per second? Anybody put it in there? In their box, Stacy?
I'm checking the chat box. Let's see if anyone, how fast do you think 8.7 meters per second is?
Everybody's going out, trying to go out to Google to Google it.
Like a physics question there.
It's a physics question.
8.7 meters per second.
I'm going to give you the answer. It's fast. It's really fast. The answer is about 19 miles an hour. So I'm clipping these hurdles about 19 miles an hour. So 5:29 in the afternoon on May 17th, I'm one of the fastest hurdlers in the country. At 5:30 in the afternoon, I would never run another hurdle in my life. I was running, approaching every hurdle at that speed, and I'm ambidextrous, can take the hurdle with my left leg or right leg, doesn't really matter. But in the first 3 hurdles, I want things to be the same, so I try to lead with my right leg forward. And as I'm going over the hurdle, the wind's blowing hard against me, and I'm trying to push back against that Kansas wind in Hays, Kansas. And I push hard, but I realize my 3rd hurdle is going to be short, and I'm going to have to take that hurdle with my left leg. I'm ambidextrous, I can take it, no problem. And as I cross the hurdle with my left leg leading, I land, and when I land, ready to run out from that hurdle, I hear, and my leg snaps. I begin to fall forward, and my body twists in the air. And I see my left shin pass in front of my face. My body hits the ground, and I bounce to a halt. You see, life can change with one wrong step. And as I did a quick once of my body, my shoulders okay, my waist okay. When I saw my knee, my patella tendon had ruptured about 3 inches off my femur bone. And my left leg was now across my right leg with my foot touching the black surface of the track. Now, let me pause the story right there because I want to give you a visual of what this actually looked like, because it's a very sharp second lieutenant. She took 9 pictures that day. And the next picture I'm going to show you is a picture of that injury, and I'll explain what's going on. But if you're a little bit queasy, you may want to turn away from your monitor right now and not look at this, because life does change with one wrong step. So what's going on in this picture? We see that my foot is on the bottom of the track. You can see my toenails there. And as you go up to the ankle bone and keep rising up, you'll see the head of the femur trying to push out from the side wall of the leg. My patella is the darker discoloration immediate to the south. If you follow that picture down to where the 3 heads are on the left side of the screen, my head is the lowest. It has a nice little fade there and a little cut on the side of the head. My friend Dino has his head on my head. Ben Curitan, who I'm supposed to go to Army Officer Candidate School with, he has his head on Dino's back. And then Roz is holding my hand that's coming out from the back of Lieutenant Curitan at the time. And you'll see a pair of white legs there, and I have no idea whose ashy legs those belong to. But in that moment, the only thing I could think about was just get up. Just push yourself up, John. Just get yourself up. It's okay. Just push yourself up. You can do it. Get yourself, oh God. And in that moment, I realized I was not getting up. And 90 minutes later, my teammates were holding me and consoling me, but 90 minutes later, as they were singing songs and hymns to keep me calm, 90 minutes later, the ambulance came. And I was put in the back, rushed off to Hays Medical Center, where another doctor in a lab coat came in, and he took one look at me, took one look at my leg and said, "Mr. Register, looks like you have a bit of a problem. I'm gonna have to fix that." And so he took 2 orderlies on my shoulders and he got on my crooked leg. "We're gonna do this on 3. And I bore down, I bit my lip and whatever I could get my hands, mouth around, and said 1, snap, and put my leg back into place. My leg ballooned up, swelled up, and I don't remember too much about what happened next. I was whisked off to from Hays Medical Center to Wesley Medical Center in Wichita, Kansas. And from there, I went underneath 11-hour vein graft operations. The next 7 days were a blur. My wife had come in by that time. My family had come in, my mother and father. My son, John Jr., is 5.5 years old at the time. And as he's sitting there in front of me, Dr. Mullins, he says, "John, you have a tough choice to make. You can keep your leg, use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or I can amputate your leg and you can use a prosthesis for the rest of your life." Now, what kind of choice is that? But it was the pain that spoke first, because my male deductive reasoning said, if I get rid of the leg, I'll get rid of the pain. And I looked at the doctor and I said, "I know it has to come off." And he said, "Okay, we'll begin in a couple of nights. I woke up 3 nights later, 11 o'clock at night, by myself in that hotel, in that hospital room, buzzing, chirping, things all around me. And at that moment, I was in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned. And I wanted to just knock the pain out. And so I reached over because I knew there was a morphine drip button, but I was too weak to roll over to press the button. So I thought I would call out to the nurse's station that I could see right outside my door, but the tubes that had been down my throat made the sound too inaudible to get their attention. So there I lay in that bed for the next 8 hours with my dangerous thoughts. Who am I now? What's my identity? Is my wife going to stick around? Will my son still see me as his father? Will I still have a job in the Army? Can I support my family? My Olympic dreams are over. At 8 o'clock, Dr. Mullins walks back in the room. He takes one look at me, sees I've done a 180-degree shift in my countenance. He immediately calls my wife, Alice, who's at the hotel trying to take care of me, my son, our son, mother-in-law, my father, and I just found out, or she had just found out that morning, which she kept from me, that because she left the job to come care about me from Arkansas, where we were living, to Wichita, Kansas, and she'd been gone for 5-6 days, her job had just released her, let her go, fired her because she came for care and concern. Who does that? She comes running over, and it takes them 45 minutes to get me out of that hospital bed into a wheelchair, wheeled out to an inaccessible playground where I'm parked and forced to watch my wife and my son play on the swings about 15 yards away from them. I lost it. I started crying uncontrollably. Everything was hitting me like a ton of bricks. And my wife, she saw me struggling, and Alice comes running over to me and said, "What is going on?" And I began to articulate to her every single thing that was in my head the night before. And then she said the words that stopped my downward spiral. You know what, John? We're going to get through this together. It's just our new normal. It's just our new normal. And when she spoke those words, she baselined my entire existence. And I thought about them, let them wash over the words wash over my mind. It was then I see John Jr. jump off the swing set, come running over to us. "Hey, Dad, you see my big jump? You see my big jump, Dad?" And in those 15 yards, he had just validated me as his father. He had just created his new normal. And I realized that's exactly what I had to do, was to create that new normal. So let's pause right there and let's look at what that really looks like from the standpoint of what was going on in my head. So right now, I'm going to show you 3 things that was happening with me at that moment of going back and really understanding and processing becoming a person that acquires a disability versus a person that is congenital and born with one. What do you think was going on in my head during that time? Put it in the chat box right now. From an acquired standpoint, but what do you think I was thinking about in this moment of acquiring this disability? What was happening in my head? What do you think? I want to know. Put in the chat box. Just start reading them off, Stace, as we go through.
So I put here fear.
Fear, absolutely.
Let's see if we have more participants sharing their thoughts. Anger.
Anger. We'll write some of these down.
All of the new things you would have to learn to do again. The big question, why? Why?
Right. Yes, all of those things are in our head, and it should be so relevant to us right now, because when you look at fear, here we got fear, we have anger, we have new things that we have to learn, and why. When we look at all of that, it should be relevant to us because of us going through COVID-19 right now. All of us have had something that has been amputated in our life where we have to separate from, with ourselves, with our families, with our employees. And there are opportunities that might lie all around us, but first we have to get past that fear stage. And the fear shows up with these stigmas. I had to overcome my own individual stigma. Who am I now? What's my identity? Will Alice still stay around? Those are internal fears to me. I'm holding those precious to me. I'm not even thinking about my wife and what she's going through. It's all protecting John at this moment. We do that. And the second thing we do is we often will listen to the stigma of other individuals, other people choosing to believe for us what we can or cannot do, which is based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation. And the final one is the cultural. We might not have influence over this one, because with cultural, it's really what we allow in and what we listen to from an external standpoint that's beyond our control. For example, do I associate the negativity of being an amputee because I watched Captain Hook? Captain Hook's an amputee in the movie Peter Pan. He's the villain. He had his arm bit off by TikTok. He's dark, he's mysterious, he's scary, and I see him as the villain in Peter Pan. Now do I associate him as an amputee with me being an amputee? When I was at Brooke Army Medical Center down in San Antonio, Texas, and I went to the burn unit in San Antonio, and I watched those soldiers go home and be released and are sitting across from their children. Are they now viewed as the Nightmare on Elm Street because society says we need to be afraid of people who have burns? Think about what society always dictates and tells us about ourselves. And about, in this conversation, people with disabilities. How do people with disabilities, how are they portrayed on our television sets, in the movie theaters? It's usually in a negative context, which gets into our psyche, and that prevents us from hiring. It's a really quick way to draw that line. So in this third poll here, take the context of the hiring process. And I want you to think about one of the fears that comes up sometimes and myths that come up sometimes about the hiring and how much it may cost a person. So in this space, what do you believe is the average cost to accommodate people with disabilities in the work environment? What do you think? What's the average cost? You'll have inside that poll, there are three answers. One is 600 and below, another one is 600 to like $2,000, another one is $2,000 plus. What do you believe the average cost is? What are we getting, Stacey? Anything yet?
Yeah, so right now they're just coming in.
Okay.
And we see it's still moving. The bars are still moving. Thank you all for participating. We still have a few more participants.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds.
Okay. These are one of the things that we see with inside of the hiring practices of people with disabilities, of why people with disabilities do not get hired, because there's a cost associated that we believe is there.
Okay, John, I'm going to end the poll.
All right.
Go for participating and share the results. So
all right. Oh, that's perfect. Pretty good. 600 and below, 44% said that, and 600 to 2,000, 44% said that as well. 11% of you said over 2,000 plus. The answer is actually $600 and below for the average typical cost of onboarding somebody with a disability. And I think that's amazing, because we think it's actually much higher, but the cost is really not too much higher than hiring a person that does not have a disability, or is non-disabled, as we call them. Because usually a person that's non-disabled at some point in their life will become disabled or temporarily disabled at a part. How many's ever broken a hand, had to use a wheelchair in their lifetime, right? So most people have done that. And you find out the different stigmas that are associated by people looking at you in that process. So as we look at this conversation and going through that polling, let's look at how we turn out our thinking now to the actual action steps of what we can do to focus on what's next and what might be better. One of the things we said, I heard said, was new things, looking for the new opportunities. Well, how do we get there? How do we take it from the individual, others, and the culture and the fear we might have in there and turn outward into looking at how we might hire, retain, and promote people with disabilities from our own mindset first, and then maybe the cultural of the company culture. So the first thing is we see that we believe we have to rebuilding our mindset, rebuilding the way things used to be. Remember when I said that the new is no prior point of reference? Well, when we're rebuilding, we're trying to actually rebuild what was once there. So I might be thinking, if I just get my life back, if I can just get back to the way it was, if I just get back to the way I used to act and interact when I had one leg, when I had two legs. But I don't anymore. And so the faster I come to the realization that I'm not going to grow my leg back, the faster I can start getting to the opportunities. But in this kind of false narrative we're on, there is a redefining moment, right? We are redefining ourselves of who we are and how we're going to show up to other individuals and how we're going to show up to ourselves. Are we going to go backwards and be beholden to the individual fears or the other stigma fears or the cultural societal fears? You think about that even with inside of coronavirus right now, and some people are opening up shop and trying to get back to the way it was. We just got to get the engine running again. And some people have seen it, like folks in New York, probably not as reticent or readily want to get back into it, jump into it, because they see death is right at their door and people are still dying at high rates. So what's the balance between that? Well, who are we listening to for that conversation? We have to figure out culturally what we are listening to others in our sphere of influence and the cultural society. So we're redefining ourselves. Or is there, like we heard one of the folks, are there new things, are there new opportunities? In either case, in this redefining moment, which can take 3 seconds, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 years, 30 years, it doesn't really matter. But at some point, we have to choose what it is, what fear we're willing to amputate to embrace this new normal mindset. So that's our release. We release ourselves either back to our fears, or we're going to release ourselves to what I call this rebirth moment, where I am truly beginning to understand that I have a new process about myself, that I have a new way of looking at things, I have a new way of seeing this reality. And as I go up the ladder on this reality, that I begin to become strong again. Just because I have an artificial limb does not mean that I know how to walk. Just because I have an artificial limb does not mean I know how to run. I have to learn all those things over. How do I show up in society? How do I drive a car? How do I walk down the street? How do I go to catch a bus or a plane or whatever that case might be? I'm learning those things over. How are people looking at me? How are they viewing me? Do I really care about how they're viewing me? All these things are in my psyche now. And it's the same thing for people with disabilities who are just trying to get hired into the workplace, that they are comfortable, just like Tree was in his position, but other people aren't, who are in the hiring positions to actually bring him on board. Wouldn't we want somebody like that, that is that sure of himself or herself into that workforce and the workforce environment? We certainly would, but we don't give the time of day for them because we're not thinking in their space, in their world. And then we get into this point of resolution or resolve. And the resolve is this. The resolve is, I am so resolute in who I am. I know exactly who I am, that I will not go back to the way it was. No one's going to pull me back culturally or from other individuals. I know exactly how I'm showing up. I am now strong enough to show up as my fully authentic self. And that really truly equals our liberation. That's our freedom. But the freedom, again, is almost another false summit, because we think the freedom is for us. I've kicked it. I'm over the corona. I'm hiring people with disabilities. But really, it's not for us, that freedom. The freedom is for us to actually build legacy for other individuals, to free others from their cages in that individual fear, or the others, or the cultural fears of where they might be. And when we do this, we see that line from the individual all the way to the liberation, but it runs through this redefining moment, because that is the critical piece. And when we have this redefining moment where we're willing to amputate what it is to embrace this new normal mindset, that's when we grow. That's exactly when we grow. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing just for a second on my screen, and I'm going to start sharing again, because I want to make sure that on the next slide that we see, that you actually have a chance to hear the video that's going on with this. I believe it's on, but I want to just double check and make sure. But I want in the chat box while we're doing this, I want you to think about that model that I just presented to you right there. And in the context of hiring, retaining, and promoting people with disabilities, where do you believe it is that we get stuck? Where do we get stuck? And let's put that in the chat box. Where do we get stuck in the process? I'm waiting. I'm waiting. Come on, people. Come on. Hurry up, people. Let's go.
Question, John. So, where do you think we get stuck from an employer standpoint?
From an employer standpoint, where do we get stuck in this process?
Is it the individual? Is it others? Okay, thank you. Worrying about saying or doing the wrong thing with disabilities.
Right.
That's a good point.
So I want to spend a couple seconds on that, on worrying about saying the right thing. And a lot of times we have all these vernaculars, or what is the correct thing? How do we show up? Well, in America, a lot of times what we do is when we identify somebody, like if I'm African American, we put the identifier in front of the thing that we're identifying. So I would not say to a person with a disability, if I'm introducing them, for example, to Stacy, I wouldn't say, hey, Stacy, let me introduce you to my disabled friend, John. We just wouldn't do that. Same thing if I was introducing to Stacy of a person of color. Stacy, let me introduce you to my black friend, John. It just doesn't sound right. It doesn't, and I get it with other countries. Like it doesn't work in other countries because it's reversed. Like in France, we flip it, right? So it's like it's not the blue shirt, it's the shirt blue. So that's the way we kind of look at the language. But how about just showing up and treating the person with the disability that's a physical that we can see, or that we can't see, that has a hidden disability. How about treating that individual as by their name? So Stacy, let me introduce you to my friend John. That is the best way that we could do it. So we don't have to even worry about labels except for the label of the individual person. And that person generally will identify what their needs are to the work environment. We don't even have to do that. We can just ask the question. So are there any concerns that you have, or what will help you do your job better? Just like we would ask anybody else that's coming into that workplace environment. That makes sense?
Absolutely. And John, we have additional comments here.
Oh, great.
Also, where we get stuck is identifying qualified candidates with disabilities. And then thirdly, belief that persons with disabilities are not strong enough to handle the work.
Right. And so we see, you look at people with disabilities, take of handling the work. Anybody that we go out to qualify, let's go back to that coaching example. If we're the coach and we're trying to build the best sports team, we want to get the best people on the team, and we've been salivating over that man or that woman that comes in that's big, strong, and robust, and we know exactly where to go to find them. Why is it that we do not take that same approach to getting the best talent in the room? And it's not diversity for diversity's sake, just to say we're going to put the right categories together, but it's actually getting the best talent. Because when you look at how people with disabilities show up, they show up with a different mindset because they've already been through a lot of the challenges that we might go through ourselves. And because of that, they give a different breadth and scope of how they show up. So I know, for example, Dr. Sherry Blauett, Paralympic athlete, physical, MD doctor that works up in Boston, wheelchair user, but also concert pianist, also a mother. And we look at her maybe wheeling at us, and her husband, Eli Wolf, who walks with, he has cerebral palsy, so he walks with a little bit of a gait issue because he can't, it doesn't walk straight. But absolutely brilliant. Been on task force to talk about these current issues and bleeds over to understanding the rights of people with disabilities, but more so how it transcends into the marketplace of work environment, sports environment. And we see all these individuals that can participate at such a high level, functioning level. There was one other question as well, Stacey, that you said I wanted to kind of get to. Go back one of the ones I want to make sure.
Well, yeah, the last comment was belief that persons with disabilities are not strong enough to handle the work.
Yeah, so I think we just talked about that. So absolutely strong enough to do the work. If you just look at any Paralympic video out there, you will see that, I guess I can give a homework assignment. If you go out, and we put in the chat box there, if you go out and you look at the video called Yes, I Can. It was done by Channel 4, British television, BBC4, Channel 4, and it's on the Paralympians going to the games in Rio de Janeiro. Just look at that video and you'll get a chance to see how people with disabilities, all types of disabilities show up. No arms, no legs, one leg, blind, how they show up in a sports environment. And at the end of that video, ask yourself the question, how do I get that person on my team? Or would I want that person on my team? Yes, I Can video. We'll try to get a link for you before this session is over.
We'll certainly get that link.
So I want you to watch this video because as I talked about my own journey, I found that in resilience is really critical, but not for resilience sake that we come closer together. That's a rubber band snapping back to its original shape. Because in my instance, my rubber band broke. So what do you do with a mindset that's broken and you don't know if you can actually move forward? You don't know if you can actually hire people with disabilities. There's an unknown factor out there. It's like COVID-19. What will the world look like when people start going back to work? Will we go back to work? Will we do telecommuting like most people with disabilities have been advocating for? How will we show up in the work environment now is absolutely that space of what are we going to amputate to get to that rebirth side of the model? And for me, in the word resilience, which has 10 letters, and I told you there are 10 hurdles in a hurdle race, 10 obstacles, there are 10 things we must get over. I won't go over all of them, but I think the first R is we have to develop a ritual. The ritual brings us to a rhythm, and the rhythm then elevates us. It elevates us and rises our level of thinking. The other thing that is critical about the word resilience, that embedded in the word resilience, before the starter pistol goes off, the announcer will say, quiet for the start. And embedded in the word resilience is the word silence. How do we hear our own voice first before we start going off and making those decisions? Let's get the team together. Let's hear what's the most appropriate thing to do to move the needle forward. So I did that by my rituals. I started swimming for physical therapy. The swimming turned into a rhythm. The rhythm, I made the Paralympic swim team. Somehow fluked up, messed up, made the Paralympic swim team. So I went from a 400-meter hurdler to an African-American swimmer. And then I saw athletes running on the track with artificial limbs, and I just couldn't believe it, right? So I had a leg made for running. 4 years later, I make my second Paralympic team. I go to Sydney, Australia, and these are the results.
Let's take a look at the men's long jump F42 final starting list, and Lucas Christen from Switzerland is the dominant one in this field. He holds both the world and Paralympic record in this event. Victor Goriansen from Sweden is up now, ready for his third attempt. It's not a bad effort. He's pretty satisfied with it. 4.89. It's actually a season best for the Swede. Here's the man to beat. He is the world record holder, jumping 5.43 in 98 in Birmingham. Well, he's pleased the crowd. He's happy with that one. And so he should be. He's smashed his world mark with 5.57, a new world mark. Well, the pressure's really on now for John Register from the USA. 5.57, the mark to beat. Nice lead up, but it's short. He's not able to take the gold from Christen, but he does move into second spot. So here are the results of the men's long jump final. Gold to Christen, silver to Register, and Goriansen home with the bronze.
So that is the incredible, amazing way of how we can look at this kind of this line that goes from the sphere to freedom, and that resolve point in our life. So after that long jump was over with, right? A reporter asked me a question. Says, John, you ran against Carl Lewis and jumped against Carl Lewis. You ran against Michael Johnson. Do you think with artificial limb technology that you could do that again and compete against those athletes? And I thought about her question for a moment, And then I said, I don't think I can do that. However, I think your question should be asked a different way. I believe that maybe your question should be, if Michael Johnson or Carl Lewis, God forbid, they lost a limb, could they run as fast or jump as far as I do? And that's really the catch up. Because when people see you in that space, you begin to attract others to say that they can show up in their space in such capacity. And so I take it and I show you the hardware of the silver medal right there, which is, of what happens. And I keep it with me, by me, but I also show it to my audiences because we look at the tragedy that's happened earlier in the life of at 5:29 on May 17th, 1994, I would never run another hurdle in my life. And now I've come through that moment, not only physically as an athlete, but also at 5:30 when I would never run another hurdle again in my life restarted. And so I did get jobs. I was hired by the Community and Family Support Center for the United States Army to run the World Class Athlete Program. And then I worked for the United States Olympic Committee. So all these things elevated. And because I was given that opportunity and not looked upon as a person with a disability, but looked at because of the mindset that I had and how the passion I had to actually deliver a process, over 200,000 soldiers now have gone through the programming to use sports as a tool for rehabilitation. It got so big, it turned into Warrior Games for the United States Olympic Committee. And Prince Harry, then we had a conversation, and he has Invictus Games because we're celebrating what people can do and not what they can't. We want to get them to the post-experience growth and out of the post-traumatic. So that's how we look at it from our own mindset. Because a lot of times, the reason we're not hiring is not because we can't really find them, it's because we're not fishing in the right pond. And we'll talk about the ponds in which we can go in. So as with the few minutes here, we have one last polling question that I want to get into.
Yeah, John,
has to do with the ratio. And this is where the kind of the coup de grace, what we're building this presentation to. What do you believe the ratio is between profitability and loss when comparing two companies where company A hires people with disability, that's PWD, people with disabilities, and company B does not? What do you believe that ratio is? And when Stacy puts it up there, you have company A outperforms company B by 1%, 15%, 25%, 50%. Where do you think that ratio actually lies?
Yeah, this will be interesting to look at. Well, we only have 3 minutes left, so we're gonna just finish the poll, get the answer from John, and we're gonna wrap up soon because I mean the hour went by so quickly. John, thank you so much. So the results are coming in.
Yeah.
I will show that in the next 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, they're coming in. Thank you all for participating.
And I was blown away by this stat. And if anybody has ever seen the Accenture report that came out, Getting to Equal, the disability inclusion advantage, you will then you understand what we're talking about. So we'll get ready to kind of close up the show.
I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. So if you can quickly respond to them, we greatly appreciate it.
Make it happen.
Yep. And so I'm going to end the poll right now and share the results so that we can wrap up the meeting.
25%, 67% of you said 25%. It's actually when Disability In did this poll in conjunction with the American Association for People with Disabilities, it's actually 50% they outperformed the company. 50% is outperformed. I'm going to just put up right here, the 4X number there is it outperforms 4 times when you have a plan in place and it goes on over time. That's some powerful numbers. It caused the comptroller of New York State, Mr. Thomas DiNapoli, to look at businesses and the people that he invests with for the New York pension plans to look at companies that fit that demographic. So let's close up here. I believe that each one of you on this call are inspirations and can push into this space because inspiration leads to motivation. Motivation in turn causes action. Actions lead us to transformation results, and these results, they re-inspire us to allow other people that are watching the process to actually catch the vision. So here are free resources for you that we can have, and we can probably, put whoever's on, we can kind of get you your the information so that you have this. And I think there was, I'm looking for it because I want to see this other slide, but I don't see it. Doggone it. want to bring that in. We have those resources for you. So there's the last thing I want to say for you all is thank you very much for your time today. We talked about a lot of things about how people with disabilities are valuable for the workforce, tolerance versus value and appreciation. But the last thing I want to leave you with is the next time you go and board an aircraft and you reach for the overhead bin, just be careful, because you never know what life's overhead bin has in store for you. Go forth, inspire your world, everybody, and we'll talk to you a little bit later. Back to you, Stacy.
John, thank you so much, and all. We appreciate you participating. I know that we went past your time, but again, please help me in thanking John. If you want to reach John, we'll provide all this to you via email. I promise I'll send this over with the links, the presentation, and we also want to promote our next Tuesday for how D&I leaders in academia respond to COVID-19 education access and equity with Dr. Darren Kelly at 1 o'clock. So we'll have the links live tomorrow. And we'll also provide all the information that John shared with us today. So I think just last thoughts in anticipation of Neurodiversity Week being next week, let's consider how do we amputate our fears, and what are we willing to amputate, right? From in a personal, professional level in the workplace, personally at home. And so I think that's food for thought, right, John? In
Absolutely.
What are we willing to amputate? So thank you all again for your time. We will be sharing all this information. Thank you for joining. Here are our social media links at Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We are also in Instagram. So we will see you next Tuesday. And thank you again, John. We appreciate your knowledge. And keep in mind, disability does matter. Thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.